Hi and welcome to SCW here on YouTube.com. Thank you for choosing the channel and choosing the video. Please subscribe right now. Leave any comments in the comment section. Please like and share the video as well. It's time to have your say because it's time for the Q&A, answering your questions in the wrestling community. We've got WWE, we've got AEW, NXT and much more. So do stick around. Some fantastic questions today from the wrestling community. If you want to leave a question for the next video, leave the hashtag AskSCW. You can get involved here in the comment section on YouTube. I look forward to interacting with you, and of course you can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. All should be coming up on your screen right about now. But that's enough from me. Let's get straight to the first question this week. First question this week coming from Jamie, the controversial one, Holmes. How do you think the Chris Jericho MJF steak dinner will go? As they're both heels, do you think one will leave early and leave the other to pay for both meals? Now, I really wish that I read this the first time on camera because I generally laughed out loud when I saw that. It's such a great creative way. And like you said, there's so many different ways that that can go. It's a very creative way that they've made this happen with these two doing this next week. I mean, it's a bit weird as well. Of course, MJF was, very complimentary to Chris Jericho last week with the hair thing going on. Perhaps it's a bit much, but at the same time, these two have got great chemistry together, and I do think they're going to make a lot of fun out of this one. Maybe one of them turns up late where they think they've been stood up. That would be very classic if Jericho was there early and MJF makes him wait. Maybe they'll argue over the way the steak is cooked. Maybe one likes it rare, one likes it well done. We can have all different kinds of flavour, with the wine as well, how they do things, sauces, not sauces. They can use a lot of comedy in amongst this meal itself. So yeah, I think it could be a lot of fun. I think your idea is great. It wouldn't surprise me if both of them tried to escape at the same time and neither of them paid for the meal in some way or form. It certainly has got a lot of comedy potentially within this segment, but of course, as we go into our next question, this is what the ultimate goal is, and that goal is coming from the question from Dan the Man Williams. We also have to give a shout out to Noob and Co, also asking the same thing here. Where do you see the storyline playing out with MJF and Jericho? Will they end up on a team or end up against each other? Because that's what the ultimate goal is here, really. We're going to learn this week if MJF is a part of the Inner Circle or is he not? Is he going to join? Won't he join? And what are the reasons to want to join? Is it because MJF believes in himself that he needs to be in the stable to become a world champion? Does he really want to become buddy-buddy with Chris Jericho? Does he want to become the prodigy, which of course currently Sammy Guevara is that prodigy? Is that the reason why the Inner Circle doesn't want MJF in this stable? And what about Wardlow? Does he join as well? Is he surplus to requirements? Does the Inner Circle become that much stronger with 7 stable members rather than having 5? The other question I asked from this as well is, is there a case where the Inner Circle, apart from Chris Jericho, is in on the act? Is MJF coming in to actually take over Chris Jericho's role, and Chris Jericho is kicked out of the Inner Circle, becomes a babyface, and MJF becomes a heel? There's one other potential way this could go as well. Maybe MJF goes into the Inner Circle and the Inner Circle implodes from within. There's so many different elements and so many different twists and turns this storyline could take. For me, this is easily quickly becoming my favourite storyline in professional wrestling right now. Omega and Hangman Page currently have that mantelpiece. They've done such a great job over the last 8 to 10 months building their storyline, but this one very quickly has got great elements of comedy. It's got a potential where it's got a real direction of where it could go. With MJF, a lot of people said this guy, he should have beat Jon Moxley for the championship at All Out a couple of months ago, but you look at this and turn around and say now there's a purpose and direction in storyline. He's immediately at the same level he was before, if not with more credits going into this. I'm really excited to see how it's going to play out. I think ultimately, if I had to guess right now, I think initially they are going to be buddy-buddy, but I think, of course, eventually they're going to be taking on one another in a singles match, and I can't wait to see how it's going to play out. Like I say, I think they're going to have a lot of fun building this storyline, and it could go easily 3 to 6 months. We are at the baby steps of where this storyline can go. But will MJF join the Inner Circle next week? I'm going to stick my neck out. I'm going to make a prediction now, and I'm going to say yes. Dylan Ketchum with our next question now, and he asks, do you want to see Hangman Adam Page versus Kenny Omega in the finals at Full Gear? Yes, I do. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are saying, well, that's got to be the predictable option. Surely those two must be on the final. They are on opposite ends of this tournament, and, they've only got to win a couple of matches. It would be the big money match for them to be in the final. I personally say, I feel it should be the predictable option, but it wouldn't surprise me if they cost each other the opportunity to get into that final. So, in some ways, I kind of feel that we're going to get the match at Full Gear anyway. The question mark is it going to be in this tournament? I hope it is, and here's my reason why. Ricochet. I think these two are the best contenders that could take the championship off of Jon Moxley now. Now MJF has gone in a different direction. You look at it and say, well, hang on, who's the next best person? For me, Kenny Omega is the person that should take the championship from Jon Moxley, defeating Adam Page in the final to establish Omega as the heel, and they've both come some close so far, and yet Omega's the one that will take it, go on to take on Moxley, and then take that championship. And then at that point, maybe Hangman Page can go after the championship and maybe take it from Kenny Omega. So for me, that's how I want to see it play out. It would be my first choice. It adds credibility to have your best superstars in a World Championship tournament to be in the final. So for me, I really hope so. But I wonder what your thoughts are in the comments below. Austin Whitley with our next question for us now. If NXT was involved in the WWE draft, who would you like to see to go to NXT? My pick, Ricochet. And what a great pick that would be as well to see Ricochet back in NXT. Let's be fair, Ricochet is not having the strongest of 2020s. Now, argue the point. I mean, in January, February, yeah, he got himself into a championship match. He was an assist to Brock Lesnar's elimination in the Royal Rumble match. But since then, Vince gave up on him, and that title match lasted 1 minute and 45 seconds. And since then, Ricochet has had a very questionable 2020. You can argue in recent weeks he's been involved with a feud with the Hurt Business. That's given him some television time, some relevance again. I really wanted him to actually lose that match on Raw. I think if he'd have been a part of the Hurt Business going forward, I think that would have been a nice change to his character and dynamic. I think a slightly heel Ricochet would be quite fun. Him and Cedric Alexander could have been perhaps the tag team element of that stable, and I think they could have gone for the tag team championships. I think it would have been a lot different and a lot better if Ricochet had done that. But at the same time, the Eddie Guerrero nostalgia was quite a nice touch as well. As for my answer, I would take someone else from Monday Night Raw's roster, or well, currently undrafted actually, but rumours according to PW Insider he will be on Monday Night Raw, is Andrade. And here's my reasoning for it, because Andrade has the pick of where he could go really, and Raw and SmackDown, I feel that he's got an opening act at best. I mean, if he was on Raw, I mean, the likely one he would be on anyway. Of course, his partner, Charlotte Flair, is on that brand. WWE doesn't tend to like to split up the couples, but they have done a couple in the latest draft. So if they were to put him on SmackDown, he could be reunited with Zelina Vega. She did care, after all, after his loss on Raw this past week, before both of them were destroyed by The Fiend and Alexa Bliss. My pick, though, would be NXT, and here's where I think he fits in very well. Legado de Fantasma, that stable, could do with one more body to make it creditable. Santos Escobar is doing a good job as the champion, the Cruiserweight champion. He's the great mouthpiece for the stable as well. His English is perfect. He could do with someone alongside him like Andrade, because Santos Escobar could almost be the mouthpiece for Andrade. They're all dressed up in these suits, abandoning that, lucha libre heritage of the mask and stuff. Andrade used to wear a mask under his old gimmicks of where he's been previously. Now in WWE, he's without the mask. I think he would look quite cool if he was amongst that stable in the suits. Escobar could push him towards the top of the card, going for the NXT Championship. He would have purpose. He would have meaning within NXT. The only thing that counters this is that Escobar would almost be the head of the stable, but the Cruiserweight Champion, where Andrade would be not the leader, but going for the NXT Championship. But if we look elsewhere in WWE, MVP is arguably the leader of the Hurt Business, and he is not the top guy in that stable. Lashley is the top guy. MVP is the mouthpiece for him, and manages to get him those opportunities towards the top of the card early this year against Drew McIntyre. So Escobar could be the same for Andrade. Let's not forget, if Andrade wants to go back to NXT, he's a former NXT champion, and as well as that, he had one of the greatest NXT TakeOver main events against Johnny Gargano. So for me, I'd be massively in favour of that. Andrade would be my pick if NXT got one draft pick to bring someone back from Raw or SmackDown back to NXT. Next, we've got Mike, Italian Hamster Mike here on AskSCW, asking two questions now. With NXT using Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal for Halloween Havoc, what possible matches may we see? And should NXT bring back classic WCW pay-per-views for NXT takeovers? Would love to see Battle Bowl, Lethal Lottery. Really good questions here, and of course, Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal. I'm really pleased to see this has been brought back into NXT. Of course, this was used for WCW in the very early 90s. Of course, we had some retro uses for Halloween Havoc back in the day. I think 92 was probably the one to stand out for me, with Sting against Jake Roberts. That particular one really stood out for me. But of course, Shotzi Blackheart was standing in front of the wheel this week, and hopefully that will be coming up on your screen right about now. My eyes were attracted immediately to the Boiler Room Brawl that came on this, but as well, we can see that other potential matches, fittingly, would be a casket match, a blindfold match. We've got a trick or street fight, a weapons wild match. We've got quite a number of different ones there. TLS, which I'm wondering, is that like TLC, but with the stairs again, or we've got like a TL scream or something? I don't know. There's multiple different options, but it seems we're going down that Halloween theme then. There's certainly a lot of fun matches that could be. A casket match would be one I think would be very fitting for the role. I can see Johnny Gargano, for some reason, being in a blindfold match. I think that it's something we've not had for a long time as well in WWE in any format. It kind of is very sports entertainment, but to bring this in, it's very cool, it's very nostalgic. NXT is very good at doing that, and if we've looked from earlier this year, like you said, with the Great American Bash, an old WCW pay-per-view, we had In Your House, which are very retro from the 90s, and of course they made a very cool feeling out of that. As for Battle Bowl, I think it would be very good, and as you went down in a further tweet, it'd be good for a weekly TV like that, halfway between a takeover. I think it could work, especially I enjoyed the early ones of Battle Bowl in WCW rather than the later ones that they did. They tend to use more of the mid-carders at the latter stage of doing it. I think when DDP won it at Slamboree 96. But when you look with the current NXT roster of doing that, certainly be a lot of fun. I think they could really make that work, and obviously doing it with the one ring rather than the two rings. You have, say, 10 winners at the end of it, go in a battle royal, winner gets a title shot. I think it's a great way, a fresh way to determine a number one contender, and certainly could make a big deal out of it. So I really like it. I think it's really fun, really exciting. Other ones that I'd like to see back from WCW, I think Starrcade is the obvious one. You know, it's one of the most classic WCW pay-per-views of all time. For me, the fact that WWE have used it as a house show for the last number of years, I think this year to use it as an actual takeover name, I think would get a lot of buzz, a lot of interest, and I think fans would be really in favour of it. So I believe there's going to be a takeover in December, so I would really like to see that come involved there. I would be quite a fan if that was to happen. Bash at the Beach in the summer could be a nice alternative to the Great American Bash. Get the sand put in there, you know, you can have, all sorts of things. Your bucket and spade at the side, I think would be quite fun as well. So I like those ones that have got a very unique feel, a nice retro feeling. You could do something with the staging, something to make everything just look a bit different. I think that would really be a nice little standout touch for it as well. For me personally, I think that would be Bash at the Beach would be awesome, just for that reason alone. So those would be my top two choices, but I'd be interested to know your choices in the comments below. Next question comes from George Jones asking, what would you have done with the time wasted during Raw Underground, and how would you have booked things different with Raw Underground? Well, I mean, people that have watched this channel before, you guys know I'm not a fan of Raw Underground. Never have been. It just hasn't been for me. Rumours are suggested this week that Raw Underground, for now, is done. It's not coming back. Storylines have progressed. They have moved on, and we will not be seeing Raw Underground make a comeback. Of course, originally they stopped recording it because people that were involved in Raw Underground, there was contact with COVID-19, and now, after a couple of weeks, they've decided, just for now, not to bring it back. A quick side note just before we get started, of course, a number of those superstars have been drafted to WWE Raw in the WWE draft. So we look at Dabba-Kato, Arturo Ruas, Riddick Moss, to name a few there. They've been heavily involved in Raw Underground. I hope now they are going to have a purpose going forward. Personally, I think they should stick together in numbers. I wouldn't mind seeing some form of Raw Underground stable. These guys coming in saying, well, we were in Underground, we've graduated, and now we're here and we're here together. Almost kind of like a retribution. And that's one angle here that you could have done for this, because as you asked there, how would I have booked Raw Underground? I've got a couple of different ideas for you, so let's go through them. One of them would have been that this would have been the reveal for Retribution all along. The takeover of WWE, something completely different. You could have had these guys who were, fighting in this fight club at that point, and you could have seen with the Retribution storyline going on, they were under masks when they were actually in the Thunderdome. So that way you could have had that purpose of gelling these two storylines together when you could have learnt it. The mastermind, the puppet behind everything would have been Shane McMahon, saying that the way that WWE currently does things, it's stale, it needs to freshen up, it needs to be different. We're in a brand new decade, it's time to make wrestling different. Raw Underground is the way to go, and it would have been his franchise, his way. This could have led then to a big stable that would have been under that, which would have been Retribution. Shane McMahon, of course, was fired from WWE after losing to Kevin Owens, so he would have had a legitimate reason to want retribution, not just with Kevin Owens, but to be put in that position to begin with, where he would have lost his position, of course, being, you know, a part of the family that runs the company. So in that sort of way, that could have been one way you could have gone. If you wanted Raw Underground just as Raw Underground, give the damn thing some purpose. I mean, literally, you look at the matches, yeah, you know, some people were clearly winning and dominating, but it was always done like over Shane McMahon's feelings of when a match should stop. It was always never clear cut of what the rules actually were. I'd have liked a feeling of how, you know, look at NXT with their new Capital Wrestling Center, the way that has been put together, and you look and say with the cage around the ring, maybe the ring doesn't have ropes, but maybe it's some form of cage around it with the people sort of, you know, outside it, you know, tapping on the cage or whatever, and you could have had like maybe some judges in that sort of format, and we could have understood what made you a winner in Raw Underground. It could have been a completely separate identity to what WWE represents. It could have been something, yes, could have been the third hour, but it could have been something that could have been, you know, something as a half time, so we, you know, had it away from what was going on with Raw, or it could have been a separate show itself, and where we understand, like, you know, a takedown is better than a kick, you know, amateur wrestling is better than just being a brawler. You understand what these judges and what people are looking for. Raw Underground all of a sudden makes a lot more sense. You can't escape because you're in a cage environment. I think that would have worked pretty well from it, and then eventually you probably could have brought a championship in. Things would have made a lot more sense, and, you know, logic, I think, is what really lacked from Raw Underground. So if you'd have had some logic, I think there would have been a bit more substance in it, and I think people would have been more invested. If you look finally, like I said, with that would have been almost tied in with the last thing, where instead of having it as a separate roster, you know, we have the current Raw Underground roster, but you could have had the separate people like Dabba-Kato only, building those stars up, and they almost could graduate to the Raw roster. Maybe Shane McMahon is looking, saying, right, NXT is providing people, but I want, you know, these people coming from NXT or whatever, they are getting so far. I want to make future stars, future main eventers, future monsters in and amongst the company. They will graduate my way rather than doing Triple H's way, which, of course, when it comes to Survivor Series, you can find a way to do a Survivor Series style match with that, but at the same time, I think would have been quite interesting to find, you know, individual unique stars completely different to the brand, completely unrelated, but I'll just use it as an example anyway. One thing that really excited me when I started watching Lucha Underground was at the time there was only 3 or 4 superstars that I was fully aware of at that time. A lot of them were characters under masks, which obviously, even if you knew the superstars, you didn't know the character because it was completely different and individual and unique to what Lucha Underground were doing. So when you saw these stars, you kind of felt, well, the playing field was completely even. You didn't know who was going to win, who was going to, you know, going to walk away the champion or victor, especially in those sort of first 10 episodes or so. Everything felt new, fresh, and exciting. If you'd have done that with Raw Underground and you had your Dabba-Katos, your Arturo Ruas, your Riddick Mosses of the world, you'd have turned around and said, well, hang on here, like, we're building new stars for the future. And once they get to the point where they've established themselves so much, instead of bringing Braun Strowman in and losing, you know, clean out in like a minute or two, these guys instead can say, right, you're ready for Raw. You put Dabba-Kato on Raw, he's a monster, he destroys people for month after month after month, and after about 3 to 6 months, he then builds himself up to be taken on the likes of Braun Strowman. For me, that way, it makes much more sense. And I think if you've done any of these 3 methods, I think Raw Underground would A, still be going, but B, I think would be a lot more successful and probably universally a lot more popular, because there were some people that liked it, but there were also the same amount of people who didn't like it. I think this would have had a much more positive response had it had some more logic and more substance. Straight as Josh with our next question now. What do you think is the worst looking finisher ever? One that looks pretty weak. I've got just the one for you. I'm going to go Hulk Hogan. I'm going with the leg drop. For me, even as a child, I just did not find that finishing move believable. I always used to think with Hogan, that usually a lot of his matches, I was quite bored. I liked the promo work. I loved the idea of Hulkamania, eating your vitamins, all that sort of stuff. But when it came to watching a Hogan match, it was always the same pattern again and again and again. And we always got that straight finish and the leg drop, despite it being iconic and what people grew up and loved, seeing Hogan win all these matches and being the icon of the 80s and stuff. For me, I always found the leg drop pretty weak. I wanted to see a different finisher in his arsenal, because I believe that if he was supposed to be the top guy of the company, I wanted to see a move finishing off matches that I felt was more believable. For modern day, I'm not really a big fan of the Shining Wizard. I find that that is probably the weakest finisher I see today. Sometimes the knockout punch as well, depending on who's delivering it. Someone like the Big Show, for example, I make an exception because I look and say, well, he's 7 foot tall, he's got a big fist, he's probably going to punch people harder than others. So it depends on the superstars, but I think of all time, has to be Hogan's leg drop for me. Noob and Cove, our next selection of questions here on Ask SCW, asking, will Asuka lose the Raw Women's title to Lana? We've already touched on MJF and Chris Jericho earlier. Will Johnny and Candince win the NXT North American and Women's titles at Halloween Havoc? And will Charlotte Flair be Andrade's manager? Well, short and sweet with Lana, she'll be participating on Raw. I do not see her winning the Raw Women's Championship. If that happens, I think Twitter goes into meltdown. Whatever's happened with Lana previously, it was a big shock she won the Battle Royal to begin with. I think because this match is taking place on Raw, this is a placeholder for what is going to lead to a bigger storyline for Asuka going further down the line. I would be surprised if the match lasts longer than I have done answering this question. Going with Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae, I wouldn't be surprised, you know. I mean, Io Shirai now has been the women's champion on NXT for a number of months. Damien Priest, not so long, but I do think that they want to do this Mr. and Mrs. Gargano both being champions storyline, and I wouldn't mind seeing it play out. And I think that if they lose these rematches now, they can't go back into the programs for quite a while. So for me personally, I would say that if they're going to do it, now is the time. But at the same time, we look and see the dream matches that are there for Io Shirai. Past this, we've got Ember Moon, we've got Toni Storm in there. Rhea Ripley still hasn't happened, which I think will probably be the likely one for December if I had to put my money on it. And you look at Damien Priest, he's not been the champion for that long. So if I had to give a bold prediction now on which way it's going to go, I would say that the champions retain. But at the same time, it's something that I would like to see. As for Andrade having Charlotte Flair as a manager, I mean, as I said in the video, I think it would be something interesting for him to go in a different direction, maybe in a stable form. For me personally, I would love to see Charlotte Flair, not necessarily as a manager, but certainly in a stable with Andrade. I think that he would feel definitely a lot more creditable. I think that he would have purpose, and I do feel that if he was getting the rub off of Charlotte Flair on screen, I think it would only benefit him. So it's something that I wouldn't mind seeing happen. What will happen when he returns, I'm not so sure. I mean, it's expected, as I said earlier in the video, that PW Insider said he will be back on Raw. If that's the case right now, and he's not aligned with somebody, I see him on main event, I see him wrestling Humberto Carrillo on a weekly basis, and unfortunately for Andrade, he deserves better than that. Mark S. Crusher 750 of our next question now here on Ask SCW. And since Nia Jax caused Charlotte's injury and Nia Jax keeps attacking Lana, do you see an alliance forming between the two? Tag titles would give Charlotte the Grand Slam, just a random thought. Well, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, like you say, you can put 2 and 2 together there. Nia Jax currently is one half of the women's tag team champions. So, I mean, if Charlotte was to come back and they didn't want to put her in the Raw Championship picture against Asuka, which of course we've seen numerous times over the summer, this would be a different direction to put Charlotte in. And of course, to protect Lana, it's not something of a partnership that I would see be long lasting if they were to do it. But as a one-off or maybe a couple of matches, just to, give Charlotte that Grand Slam, why not? Perhaps it would be something different. Maybe fans would be perhaps more invested in seeing Charlotte in this sort of program rather than seeing her all the time going for the Women's Championship. So it's not something I would necessarily rule out, especially while Nia Jax remains a tag team champion. But when that changes, if she drops those championships before Charlotte returns, then I would say that it's pretty unlikely. But we'll have to wait and see what happens going down the line. But it's a random thought, yes, but you know what? It's quite creative, and I like to give credit to creative here on SCW. So I kind of like your suggestion. Why not? It's something different. Last question this week coming from Wrestling is Great. At Sushi Anita, in your opinion, do you think he's the king of the deathmatch or took it too far and ruined it? Good question, this one, but arguably I'm possibly the wrong person to ask. I've not seen so much of Anita's work really in previous times. So I did watch one of the death matches today with Terry Funk, who I would consider to be the king of the deathmatch. I mean, I've seen a few of his back in the 90s, of course, the famous one with Cactus Jack as well. I would consider those guys probably to be more in the king element for myself, as I'm more familiar with their work. Deathmatches, they're not everybody's cup of tea, so I would understand why people wouldn't necessarily be in favour of them. I can take them or leave them. I'm okay with them. I don't mind watching them, but I am probably less partial to them now than what I would have been probably in my younger years. Obviously, the dangerous element that comes with the death matches certainly has an exciting element to it. But as I've probably got a bit older, I'm kind of more on the idea that I'm more intrigued on the storyline side of things rather than just necessarily the danger that might be involved. But what I would say is that Anita, very good from what I watched and what I've seen in the past, but unfortunately I can't give you a good enough answer to say if would be king or not. But if my opinion of what I've seen, I would go with Terry Funk. But that's all here for Ask SCW this week here on YouTube. Thank you for watching as always. Please drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about some of the topics we've been discussing on today's show. I look forward to interacting with you in the comments. If it's your first time watching and you've enjoyed, please make sure to hit a like. Even if you've been watching before, hit the like if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe as well. Hit the bell for notifications when new videos will be coming out. Next week, make sure to keep an eye out. Bound for Glory predictions as well as Hell in a Cell will be coming on the channel. We'll be taking a week's break from This Week in Wrestling, so that will be coming back in a fortnight. Of course, the new episode, though, is available for you now. That's current. That was released on Friday night, Saturday morning, depending on where you are in the world. Go and check that out now if you haven't already. And while you're here as well, why not go and check out Wrestling Customs 24/7. Go and check out their website and also follow them on social media. Custom made championships, and they look fantastic as well for your action figures. Go and check them out now. But that's all for me anyway. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time here on YouTube. Have yourselves a great day. You've been watching SCW.